Happy holidays from the Signal Watch. This year, we're watching movies that are Christmas films, but which fall into at least one other genre. We're looking for films that mix up a bit of the spirit of the season with horror, sci-fi, or whatever our co-contributors brought to the table. So, get out the eggnog and join us for some holiday fun as we talk a few Christmas movies. Stay merry. We're gonna try to make this work. Happy holidays and welcome to the Signal Watch. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Steens, and with me today is...
Marshall Preddy.
Marshall, welcome back, man. It's been a long time.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm the ghost of Christmas future.
Yeah, we're recording this like way before the holidays, but we're going to start releasing these in November, so I wanted to get it done. In fact, today we don't even know who won the election. I haven't checked the internet in a few hours, so that'll give you an idea of what day it is and when we recorded this. But so what we decided to do for the theme this year is talk about genre Christmas movies, and you selected
Krampus.
Yeah, so did you see this one in the theater?
I did not. I actually, it had a few, I guess last year, Voodoo had a special on it. I thought it was interesting. So I bought it. I really just bought it for the kids, and they watched it and they loved it. I was watching it with my son. So the last 30 minutes, and a couple of things hit me about the movie. One of which is it's really well done. Like, it has very polished, very it's hitting above its weight from a subject matter perspective with the cast, and we can talk about that. And the other thing is that I only saw the last 30 minutes. It has an awesome ending, and I was just like, this movie is not what I expected. I thought it was going to be pretty. I did not expect it to be as entertaining and as good as it was. So we can get into that. But then, so then I was glad that I bought it, and that's why I suggested it for this, because I just thought, this movie has a lot of interesting things going on that I feel like they haven't really been done before, at least relative to the subject matter. We're still talking about sort of a genre horror flick. But I thought this was fun. I thought it was really good. I'm curious to see what you thought of it, and have a conversation about it.
Yeah, so I saw this back when it came out. I am friends with Simon Day, so this is where you end up when you it's the holidays and you're friends with Simon Day is seeing Krampus upon its theatrical release. I think it was like the third time he'd seen it. But yeah, I mean, I enjoy it. I don't think I'm as nuts about it as a lot of other people, but I agree that it definitely does some really good stuff. I think the cast is stellar and really well thought out.
Really good cast.
But yeah, so the plot, if you've not seen it, I can't imagine you're listening to this if you've not seen it, but young kid in a family, maybe a little too old to believe in Santa. I don't have kids. I don't know. I can't even tell how old kids are. But he's got a pretty typical, very waspy family, from, as you would see in a movie of kind of upper middle class. And they're doing the holidays, and the cousins who are rednecky show up, and they've brought along an aunt who's kind of a pain in the ass. And the kid decides, due to a set of circumstances that, he loses his faith a bit in the spirit of Christmas. And this brings down the Krampus upon them. And I don't know if I want to talk much more in much more detail. I'll let you pick up from there.
Yeah, so I had not, and I'm not tremendously, I sort of knew, and maybe from you, the sort of legend of Krampus, which is it's like an Austrian German sort of legend where Krampus was known to terrorize naughty boys and girls. This movie sort of takes that idea and repurposes it as the engine of a horror flick. And where this kid, as you say, if we can talk about this, because I thought that it had kind of a weak trigger. Like, that's all he did. I'm sitting there. That's one of the things where I'm like, all he says is, I hate Christmas. And he doesn't believe in Santa. And it's very vague. It doesn't feel like the sort of thing that would call down an apocalypse on you and your entire family. But that's basically what happens with Krampus. Is Krampus visits them and descends upon them with his horde of his. It's sort of like a what they call the shadow Santa. Basically, it's like he's like an evil Santa, an evil bizarro world Santa with elves and minions that terrorize this family with murderous mayhem, awfulness. As punishment for their basically losing faith in Christmas. I mean, it really has a lot in common with A Christmas Carol, and they don't hide that. That's the first thing you see in the movie. With the second thing you see in the movie is a shot of Ebenezer Scrooge opening Christmas Day, looking out and finding out that it was all a dream. So they're watching that. But in reality, Krampus is a much darker tale where there's not threatened or ominous mayhem that's sort of like looming over you. It's actively a slasher flick, basically. So it's a horror film where these beasts are there to kill you. And that is, and I would say the first half of the movie sort of starts out almost like a satirical, Home Alone or Christmas Vacation, and then the second half is a much more familiar genre, deadly visitor horror movie. We're here to kill you, and this is all the terror we're going to rain upon you.
Right. So the movie was written and directed and I think produced by Michael Dougherty. Who'd done Trick or Treat. I knew his name originally. He was one of the writers, I believe, on Superman Returns, like way back in 2006. And so, he started carving out this holiday genre thing with Trick or Treat, and kind of picked up here. And I agree. So it starts off really, the first sequence as you're getting to the credits is basically like a Black Friday sale. And watching, which is something that has blown my mind for years, is in the season of giving, people are punching each other and kicking each other. And this is something that, when I was a kid, the height of this was the Cabbage Patch Kid phenomenon. Of parents were like beating each other up in Toys R Us when they'd put out a pile of Cabbage Patch Kids. And it just seemed really messed up even to me when I was a kid. And now that's become part of the season, is this Black Friday rush of people waiting at Target at, 7:00 at night and making all of the Target employees then work so Target can make its profits on Thanksgiving night itself, not the day afterward, which is what it used to be, which is why it was called Black Friday. Because you went in the black then. But that's the vision of who we are at Christmas that this movie begins with, and then immediately goes into, for some reason in this department store, they're doing a Christmas pageant, and their son is in the middle of a fight when you come upon him. I don't even remember why they said he got into the fight. But then you get home, and none of the family is excited at all about the fact that it is Christmas. Dad's like looking at his phone for work. Mom is, who's Tony Collette, is totally stressed out about the fact that her family's coming and trying to have this, at least the house, look perfect for Christmas.
Very, very Martha Stewart-y, as they point out in the film.
Mm-hmm. His teenage sister wants to go hang out with her dope smoking boyfriend. All pretty typical stuff. And I mean, this is one of the things I want to reflect on here a little bit is, I mean, a few years ago, I started digitizing home videos for my family. And, you know, it was me in like 7th or 8th grade walking around the house with our VHS camera and recording people. And I couldn't understand why everyone was telling me to go to hell as I was pointing a camera in their face, like right around Christmas. And there's this one shot of my mom, and she like looks up at me from like she's making something in the kitchen, and she looks so tired, like so tired. And like my grandparents are there, and my aunt and uncle are there, and you're just in that like got to keep everybody happy mode at that moment. And so when I was watching this movie, that's really what I was thinking of, looking at Tony Collette, of like, I know what this is. And it wasn't like my mom was like any kind of Martha Stewart person, but that was super, super familiar, of everyone kind of coming through the door. And when they do, you don't really know each other all that well. You're a collection of people who kind of lives not real close to each other, but that's what we do on the holidays, is spend it together with family.
I thought it was interesting that I thought a lot was revealed. So they're sort of like going around the house with each of the main family characters, the mom, the dad, you know, he's drinking a scotch. The teenage daughter, she's on a Zoom call or whatever with her boyfriend who's got a snowman bong that he wants her to come over and hit. And she says something that's really interesting, and I think sums up a lot of what I think one of the themes of the movie is, talking about sort of how we experience and then how we remember our holidays. She says it takes an awful lot of work to make our family look more awesome than it is. And that I thought that was getting at one of the themes of this movie, is that everyone sort of, and this is the holidays in general, and I think it goes back to the very opening scene where everybody's killing each other trying to find these bargains that are only available for an hour on Black Friday. Everyone is like struggling towards some sort of idyllic holiday season in their brains that doesn't really exist. In reality, we're all stressed out. We're all trying our best. We're all getting on each other's nerves. We're all like flawed human beings. We're all sort of killing each other in this quest for the perfect holiday. And this family's, as you say, this family's no different. But it gets at, and you say, well, why did Krampus come? You know, when this one kid, you know, he's the main character, right? He's frustrated. This little he's sort of like the Spielbergian youngster at the center of this film, who's still on the edge of wonder and still believes, can't get it. All he wants to do is watch the Charlie Brown Christmas special, and experience that with his family and do the traditional things that his family always does. And nobody has time for him. And this is why Krampus comes, not merely because of this kid's frustration and his swearing off Christmas and saying, I hate everyone. But as the grandmother says later, it's all of us. It's all of us losing sight of the true meaning of Christmas. And that's what shoves us away from this idyllic version of Santa and the holidays that we're all striving toward, into a shadow version where we turn on each other and are ultimately destroyed. You know, so I sort of thought that was this kind of theme of the movie, kind of what it's getting at. And one of the things I like about the movie is that it just works on a bunch of different levels. You're sort of like trying to think, I don't think it's fully successful at what it's trying to do, but it is aiming high. And that's one of the things that I liked about it.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that we're you know, I think it's almost like,
sorry to jump ahead thematically.
No. I think that's great, because one of the things that then happens in the film, and this is where I think, you know, interpretations are going to start varying a little bit, is they do move into kind of this slasher mode. The first thing that happens is, one, they get locked in the house with the power cut off, and you don't really realize at that point they've basically been pulled into the shadow realm, right? They don't actually exist, I don't think, technically inside our world anymore.
Right, they're in the Christmas upside down.
Mm-hmm. And so then the like 14 or 15-year-old daughter gets picked off by Krampus. This is a PG-13 movie, by the way.
Right. So it's not terribly gory. Everything is implied. All the real violent stuff is sort of off screen. The only violent deaths belong to the evil puppets, the toys, and the toys that attack the family later on in the movie.
But yeah, I mean, it's got kind of a weird thing where it's the first person we're going to pick off is going to be the cute sister, whomever, not like the worst people from either family.
Who didn't even have sex. She's the first one to die. She's not all she's
breaking all the horror rules.
But she was going to go have drugs with her boyfriend, so
that's true. That's very not Christmassy, I guess.
That's very not Christmassy. She wanted a green Christmas.
But but then from there, yeah, I mean, it kind of does follow the pattern of like, okay, well, we're going to go out and try and find her out in the cold, and they figure out the world's, the houses are empty that are around them. They're in this like 0-degree blizzard that's going on, and things are just not. You start having then like the puppets that show up and all these things. What I think I was expecting out of it, writ large as a movie, was you kind of get what the morality is, but there was never a like point at which, unlike say Christmas Carol, a decision could be made so anyone could survive, which the movie kind of gives you a false idea that will occur, because they have this whole animated sequence where the grandmother talks about her past, I guess in Germany, and when she was the only survivor of Krampus showing up.
Right.
And I was
That's brilliant, by the way. That's one of my favorite scenes for, when the grandmother does her recap saying, hey, I know this is Krampus and here's why. She knows what's up. First of all, she's German. And so the movie does a good job layering this in over the beginning of the movie about, the grandmother is very wise and she's tuned in to the kiddo. And they have a thing going like she can speak German and he's basically the translator. He knows how to speak German as well as his dad. And she relates this to them, but in that sequence where you see her become a victim of Krampus, and for the same reason, right? She gives up on Christmas because everyone around her fails her and fails to make the holiday what it should be for her. And so she basically curses Christmas, and Krampus comes and kills her whole family. But as you say, she gets to live. This whole sequence, by the way, and I think this is important, is done in the style of the 1940s claymation Christmas movies, the Christmas specials that came out, like Santa Claus is Coming to Town, I think is specifically. So it looks like one of the old Burl Ives Santa Claus specials that we used to see, the Island of Misfit Toys. But it's a grandma's flashback. I thought it was really well done.
Yeah. So, and that was kind of like, when you were talking about, like, I think this movie has a great ending, I was kind of like, well, that's actually my problem with the movie, is it sort of just ends. It has a non-nebulous ending.
Mm-hmm.
They don't exactly, no one comes out and says, and this is what befell the family. But it's also like, there's only so many interpretations of what happened, and that you never get the feeling like after the first third of the movie when the kid, throws his letter out into the snow.
Should we talk about the ending? Because
let's
just go ahead. Tell anybody now, if you're going to watch this movie, we haven't spoiled the ending for you yet, but understand that we're about to. So if you want to turn this off, go watch the movie and then come back. we totally understand. If you're listening at all, frankly, we love you and hope to see you soon. But what happens is the kid gets to the point where everybody is killed. He's gone to escape. He is the only one left. He has a similar moment as the grandma. Mm-hmm. So the grandma back in Germany or Austria or wherever she's from, one of those, her entire family is killed. Krampus lets her live as a memory of his reality, because just like Santa, Krampus needs people to believe. He leaves one survivor. Krampus then leaves the little boy and says, okay, he gives the little boy in the most hilarious Polar Express nod I think I've ever seen, gives the little boy a bell and says, hey, I'm going to let you live. This is what you did. Your letter to Santa that you tore up and ripped up, and you said you're done with Christmas, and that's why I came. And then Krampus doesn't say all this. He just leaves a crumpled up bit of the note and the bell and says, okay, you can leave. And then he goes off, and he's going to kill the last kid. Instead of doing what grandma did and sort of accepting her fate and moving on and living, he decides that he wants to trade his life for his family. He wants to get them back. He goes to Krampus. He begs Krampus to undo what he's done. And there's a very pregnant pause where it almost looks like Krampus and his minions are taking a moment to commend the boy for his sacrifice and then agree to that deal. But they don't. They don't. They throw him into hell too. And the next thing you know, the family is waking up on a Christmas morning, and you think it's going to be, the movie sort of sets it up. Oh, they gave you your wish. Mm-hmm. They've undone everything. They've allowed you to live. And all your family is reunited, and it is in fact the idyllic Christmas morning where everybody is happy. Everybody's glad to see each other. Everybody's celebrating Christmas the way that the little boy wanted it to be celebrated. But what gift does he get?
He gets the bell.
He gets the bell. Again, Polar Express. I love that this is a nod. It has to be a nod to Polar Express. Yeah. Where it's like, oh, this is a reminder that I'm real, except that it's Krampus. And zoom out and you find out the idyllic family, that the holiday they're having is now like, I guess, a time loop. they're in a snow globe, and they are in a snow globe, and they are collected as one of the many families that Krampus now torments forever. They're in hell, basically.
Yeah, of Christmas hell.
A Christmas hell that Krampus made for them. And the very last scene is all of Krampus's minions rushing which that was my least favorite part of the movie. To me, I would have just zoomed out. But
so if you were to take it from the abstract and boil it down to the concrete elements, what do you think then they are trying to convey about Krampus's mission, about what we're supposed to take away from this as a viewer?
I think Krampus really is there to be a shadow Santa and to preserve, through force if necessary, the true meaning of Christmas. I think that it's not clear to me. I guess my problem with the movie is it's not. I thought like they needed to do more to bring down the hell of Krampus upon them. Like I didn't feel like they really, like this family is pretty bad in terms of especially the in-laws who arrive, and we could talk about them, but they are basically the analog to the Griswolds in-laws who are on Christmas vacation. They are the awful in-laws that arrive to terrorize, and they are every bit, they're worse. They're like a sort of cross between that and the Dursleys in Harry Potter, with their awful, spoiled, fat children. They're terrible in every way. But you almost, and maybe that's it. Maybe it's the extended family who is a cocktail with a regular family. It's their destruction of the little boy's desire for Christmas that leads to their doom, collective doom.
Yeah.
Basically, it isn't just the boy, and I think that's one of the things the movie tries to explain by having the grandmother saying it wasn't any one person's fault; it was all of our fault for losing sight of what was important, and for being awful to each other.
Yeah, the thing I find curious about it is they also talk and they do, like, they keep kind of giving these hints that these people are going to hug it out and hug their way out of all of this, from time to
Yes.
time. And they also kind of give a lot of hints about the past and all this, all of which, that extends way beyond the couple of days around Christmas, right? You're talking about decades of family issues. And that's really what you bring to the table when you don't normally see people, but everyone's suddenly in one house, trying to make nice because there's nowhere else to go. And so that's part of what I found kind of challenging about it was they're really blaming people for just having family issues.
I agree. And that's what I struggled with is like, I don't, especially the core family, right? Mom, dad, brother, sister.
Mm-hmm.
Not only do I not think they really did anything wrong here, they're struggling through Christmas just like we all do.
Mm-hmm.
They're sort of commendable, in how they're trying to relate to each other and relate to these awful in-laws that they have. I was like, really? Are we saying these are the people who deserve deserve this kind of eternal fate and damnation in Christmas hell? Did they really not live up to their bargain? It seemed like they're really trying to preserve Christmas, especially for their young son. Even the older daughter, she's antagonistic like all older sisters are, but she loves him. It's like clear that she is on his team. She doesn't want, there's a pivotal moment where, the little boy has a letter for Santa. We should say this because it's crucial to the plot. He's writing a letter to Santa, and his letter is very heartfelt. It is a letter that doesn't just ask for toys. It asks for issues in their family, as you say, long-standing family issues to be resolved for Santa, because he is part of the somewhat wealthier side of this family. And the extended family that comes to visit are the kind of, it doesn't say so, but they're the kind of white trash kind of extended family, a la the Griswolds and their extended family in Christmas Vacation. The unclassed, the very,
Right.
the Trumpy family, as it were, before Trump was elected. But the dad is a gun nut, and he's got two tomboy daughters who are into professional wrestling, and and the older son is a sort of Dursley kind of character, just fat and oafish. And one of the girls finds, what's the kid's name? Ben. I think it's Ben, right? Ben Engel finds his letter to Santa and reads it out loud, sort of humiliating him. But in the letter, he's asking for, hey, I want mom and dad to love each other again. I want Uncle Bob or whoever to get back on his feet financially, and there's a sort of like, he really wants the best for the family. He's not trying to out them, but they start reading the letter aloud. It humiliates him. And he's already struggled to get people to sort of do the Christmas thing that he wants, watch the movie, hang out with each other, spend time with each other. And instead, this is just the last straw. It fails him. It utterly rips apart the last shred of belief that he has in Santa. He's being mocked for it. And that's what sort of causes him to sort of give up on Christmas and tear up his letter. All of that is to say, I don't know what they did. I don't know what this family did that was so bad to deserve Krampus visiting hell and damnation upon them. So that's the problem I had with the movie. I don't disagree with you. I'm sorry, I let you respond.
No, I mean, that was really, as I was watching it again this time, because I'd seen bits of it on cable, but I had only seen it in the theater and then this time, and I was like, I I felt when I finished it the first time like there was just something really missing from the movie, and to me that's really it. I feel like they're kind of damning the mom, Toni Collette, for having the Martha Stewart Christmas, and it's like, everyone kind of does Christmas different. So I don't know exactly. They didn't give a prescription for how it should have been different. Maybe she shouldn't have been serving little game hens or whatever. But,
right.
But it's not. She might have been being a little pretentious, but she was, feeding people and doing all the things a Christmas host does. And
right.
You can't knock someone for keeping a tidy house. I wish I could.
Dad was taking calls. He was working during Christmas.
Yeah, and even at that, it's kind of like, it's how realistic is it really to say that someone can really not take calls from work during I'm not taking any calls. You know how far that'll get you in most jobs. So I mean, and anyway, I didn't feel, and then they did, and I kind of, frankly, if it had been a straight up rated R movie, I probably would have been more on board with the ending of it. But it had been kind of like, it's a rated R movie, and we've done some terrible things to these people as it went through. But it kind of soft sold all of it by being PG-13. And they were kind of hinting at some of the horrific things that, like with the giant Jack in the Box eating one of the children, and all those sorts of things. Right. But they're shitty little kids. I don't know that being condemned to a life of hell, of Christmas hell, was necessarily like, I honestly would have been totally fine with some sort of ironic twist ending of some kind where someone did actually learn something and it mattered. And I think that's kind of the difference between an R-rated movie and a PG-13 movie. I'm sure it was written as an R movie.
I'm sure it was too, and they decided to keep the ending, and so I'm sure there's some compromise. It reminded me of Drag Me to Hell in the way that it did. In the Drag Me to Hell, you always felt like there was going to be a redemption, but in Drag Me to Hell, there's a very clear contractual thing. And if you haven't seen Drag Me to Hell, I'm just going to tell you the ending is the ending is similar, but in Drag Me to Hell, there's a very clear contractual thing where, like, you broke the rule, you were aware of the rule, and now you are going to get dragged to hell. There's no getting out of it, but you had foreknowledge of it. Mm-hmm. This family there's not really that. And in that, it reminds me a little bit. You ever read the short story, A Good Man is Hard to Find by Flannery O'Connor?
I have not, no.
So there's a short story by Flannery O'Connor, and it's 50, 60, 70 years old at this point. I forget about it, but it reminds me of that. And that's what sort of it gives me a window into this, what's going on here, that I sort of wanted to float this theory with you and see what you thought. In Flannery O'Connor's A Good Man is Hard to Find, this bickering family is fighting and bickering and being petty to one another. And the old woman in the family wants to go see her old house or something like that. She wants to drive out, see the house, and they put the whole family in the car and drive out to see the house. And she's just insistent they've got to go do this. And she is petty and she is awful, and she's forgotten where the house is. And the whole family is kind of, they're mean to each other. They're bickering. They're not getting along. They run into just by happenstance, they take a wrong turn, they get lost, and they run in by happenstance to some gangsters who had car trouble, and they get stopped. There's a baby in the family, and the gangsters take them family out one by one and shoot them in the field and steal their car, and the whole family is just summarily executed in the forest, and I had a real problem with that when I was a freshman at Baylor, reading that in my freshman English class, where it was being taught. And I remember my English teacher saying, hey, this is because of their moral failings. This is like, this is what Flannery's getting at, is they failed each other and it led to this. And I'm like, that's ridiculous. They didn't do anything wrong. They just ran into some really bad people and it was bad luck. And I started thinking about that. Since the first time I saw the ending of this movie, and especially on rewatching it, that's what I can't escape. Like, what if Krampus is just a chaos agent and isn't really punishing people? Like, its punishment is not legitimate. Krampus is just a chaos agent, and these people fell on the wrong side of Christmas. Maybe they violated some rule, but the movie really, it's in some ways, and this is where I get it, it has some complexity that I feel like it's trying to get, because the people are really heroic. They really do sacrifice for one another. When they're under the gun, they don't behave like assholes to one another. They are there for each other, and they are down for it. They are whatever it takes. They are willing to sacrifice, and they really do have the learning moments that you expect a family to have facing this formidable foe. They are dedicated. They sacrifice for one another. They try to protect the kids as much as they can, and they fail. And it's a weird movie because you don't normally see that. This family they're flawed, but they're trying. They really redeem themselves against the Krampus, and it doesn't matter. They all die anyway, and they end up in a hellish time loop simulation, snow globe. So in that respect, I feel like it's not justified, but I wonder what their thought was. How would they justify it?
Yeah, I mean, there's an argument that Krampus actually puts them in a better place, right? At the end in that snow globe.
That's yeah, exactly. Yeah.
They are getting along now. They're all like high-fiving and drinking cocoa, and and maybe it could be seen as a reward that he's capturing that moment for this family, for them to be in forever. But he's also going to haunt them with it forever.
Well, that's what it comes down to. Like, remember when the kid is like, he's asking, he's begging, he says, I just wanted Christmas to be like it was. This is what I think this movie is getting at. I don't know that the movie is trying to justify its punishment of all the characters. I think it's basically trying to say that the struggle for the idyllic Christmas, when you finally get it, is illusory. It doesn't, your perfect Christmas of the past doesn't exist, and it never existed. And you trying to do it to each other, you're the ones doing this to each other. Stop. So I really think it's a parable of the stuff that we put ourselves through hell to reach this sort of perfect holiday. And I think that's ultimately the point. The movie is sort of a satire of modern holiday manners and the nostalgia trips we go on around this time of year.
I think that argument could have possibly been made better had they had, and I don't know how you balance this with a kid losing his faith in Santa. Right. But, because the line is weird when like a 9 or 10, I don't know how old this kid is, 10-year-old is asking about Christmases of yesteryear. Mm-hmm. Like that's something you start thinking about when you're like maybe like 14 or 15 of like I'm starting to hit that point where it's like not all like gumdrops and magic for me on and now I'm kind of realizing Christmas is kind of like this pattern that we go through. Right. And it's and now I'm getting socks for Christmas. I'm not getting, the X-Wing fighter that I've been dreaming of for, months on end leading up to Christmas and bags of candy and all that. And so it's kind of a weird thing. And, they could have done that with, to your point about the story of the grandmother wanting to see the house, right. Even the grandmother wanting to have the Christmases how they were. But they use her for another thing within the story. But I definitely take your point, and I think it's a really good one of when you do get that kind of perfect Hallmark Christmas. It's it's an illusion, and it's not a pleasant one. So yeah,
Would you want to live in that? Is basically you're living in a simulation now.
yeah,
And if you know it's a, you know this whole movie is just a mixture of so many interesting ideas that you almost never get to see in a horror movie. I like that it tried a bunch of stuff and that it really had a lot going on. I think I agree with you that it doesn't do a good enough job at pulling it together. Um, but that's kind of my theory of the movie
yeah,
is that really what's happening is this is you're you're trying to force yourself into this idyllic Christmas, and you end up having a crappy one because you're never living up to the memories that, and even this kid, he's old enough now, as you say, he's old enough now that he remembers what everybody used to do and he wants to go back to that. And
hmm
we're really all like that. We remember, even, when David Beckner shows up and he says, let's make some memories. And I think that's what everybody wants to do. And we all end up trying too hard. I sort of think that's the sort of parable the movie's trying to say, that we really put ourselves through hell. And that when they finally do obtain it, it's as a monster's toy. Basically, you're stuck in this reality, this magic monster created for you, and it's not real. And they all kind of know it at the end. The knowing looks on each other's face. It's a cool. My favorite thing about the movie is that ending that sort of dragged me to hellish. It's not a happy ending, and that's my son's favorite thing. He's like, "It's weird, Dad, because it's not a happy ending, and most horror movies have an okay ending for the people, and this doesn't." And he's
well,
right.
the one survivor in the horror movie
The one survivor. Yeah, the one survivor who walks away. But here, everybody survives, but they
yeah.
survive in a new hell that's been created for them.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great way to think of it. I'm definitely going to think of the movie differently, and and appreciate that a lot more. Um, but yeah, and I before Halloween had even hit, uh, the Hallmark movies had already hit
Right.
on cable. They're running on two channels, 24 hours a day for Hallmark, and someone else is also running them right now. It might be Lifetime. I can't remember who, but they're their own. They actually made a movie for one of the networks that was a joke about how that's basically a bubble of Christmas hell, starring one of the people who's usually in their movies, Alicia Witt. And it is kind of, that's one of the reasons I always, go back and forth with friends on Facebook who genuinely enjoy the Hallmark movies. I started watching them ironically. I don't even know why I'm still watching them at this point. I must like them on some level, but that's really the thing. I'm constantly talking at the screen and like what kind, because I just think it's so crazy. Every one of these
Right.
movies has this crazy vision of Christmas, and they all go through the same pattern in those things of, they always remember when they cut down trees with grandma or make
Right.
cookies
Right.
with grandpa or whatever they did every year. And I just want to recapture that. And they do, and that's the promise of those movies. And they run them 24 hours a day for more than 2 months. We are psychotic about Christmas, and whatever that thing is, we're trying to recapture from when we were like 8 years old.
Well, that gets to the other thing. The other thing that I really like about this movie, there's a lot. It's very referential. There's a ton of different little allusions to Christmas movies, and it works similarly to the way horror movies can do that. So what's great about and to just talk about genre for a minute, what's great about Christmas movies and what's great about genre movies in general is that you can take shortcuts in world building because there's such a rich mythology already built in there that we understand as being part of the genre. And that's sort of what they're picking off here from the very beginning. They're showing you, the almost like right at the right at a bad Santa, for example, and then the hellish Black Friday Thanksgiving shot that goes right into the classic Christmas Carol. right? And then, but there's more. It's more than that. You know, the kid wants to watch the Charlie Brown Christmas special, and then there's some allusions. I mean, this is basically this movie has callbacks in its plot to Home Alone and Christmas Vacation and other modern classics, and so we really feel like this movie is sort of taking you on, not like a spoof, but it's definitely alluding to these other things that are in the culture and sort of bringing you along. And now you're thinking about, well, how does media fit into what my ideal version of a classic Christmas? Because it's definitely part of this kid's idea of what an ideal Christmas is that Christmas movies are on and you're listening to Christmas music and you're playing the greatest hits of Christmas. You're watching the Christmas shows, you're playing the Christmas music, you're making the Christmas cookies, you're making a Christmas dinner. They're hitting all their marks and they're failing. And that is like the poignancy of that. It's a hell visiting on top of hell. They're really trying to have the best Christmas. The in-laws show up and they think, oh, this is going to be a hellish Christmas. And it turns into an even more. So they're another layer on top of that. It turns in, they think, oh, this is a Christmas from hell. Now that I've got, the unexpected aunt showing up, complaining about everything. And then it adds to a layer on that. The in-laws are bad enough that you think, okay, maybe Krampus is deserved. For them, maybe, I'm not shedding a tear, but even they, again, this awful family shows up. They're redeemed too. They are, Gun Nut happens to be armed, and they're able to hold them off for a little while. I thought it was just tonally, it was interesting because it turns into like a sort of like Tremors, it's like, oh, we're guarding against, now we're uniting against this common foe and we are redeeming ourselves and fighting it. It basically becomes Aliens, where they fight this beast and they lose, all except one. And then of course you get the Drag Me to Hell ending. I liked it a lot. I agree with you that it's flawed. I think it needed at the very beginning a setup that explains why Krampus contractually, like Drag Me to Hell, you said the magic words you shouldn't have said. You tempted fate, and that's why Krampus came. And it doesn't have that. It kind of needed it. That's my big flaw. Is like, I don't understand why this family is facing that. I think they could have done that. There could have been a better trigger. I mean, even Candyman, you have to say Candyman's name 3 times before it shows up.
Well, it doesn't. They show how many of those snow globes Krampus has.
Right.
With the idea, are we all in those?
Right. Right. Oh, that's a good point. Yes. Are we just, it again goes back to, we're just doing this to ourselves. He's just like, that's what it made me think. He's just an agent of chaos. He's just working down the list and you'll be there next. It's not that they did anything special. Maybe it was just their time.
Yeah. So we said at the very beginning, we like the cast. I just want to go through like real fast who is in this, because I don't have my notes in front of me. You do, so if you can remember anybody else. Allison Tolman had come off doing Fargo, and I think this is like one of the first things she did just post season 1 of Fargo. And she's cast weirdly much older than she was at the time when this came out. Right. But I think they did that because I don't know if they decided, well, 1, she's a dynamite actor. 2, if you said she's Toni Collette's sister, people might be able to buy that. There's a little bit of physical resemblance. Toni Collette, I've mentioned a couple times, like her.
She's great. She's great, yeah.
And Adam Scott is in it, which is a really interesting casting choice because I think Parks and Rec had just wrapped about this time. He hasn't had a huge movie career since this that I can think of, but he, he's really good, and he does a really good job of seeming like, the kind of like, dad who knows how to sweep in, drop, some encouraging words, and bop back out because he's got some work to do. And I don't know who the sister was. She's kind of disappeared.
Stefania Levy Owen, and one of the little tomboy girls is her real life sister.
Oh, crazy!
Yeah, no, and I noticed that, and I actually noticed that even before I looked at the IMDb. I thought the casting here was really good. I thought it was interesting because there's like Adam Scott. He's sort of like, there's a bad where she's sort of like where the awful aunt makes a reference to being a Jew, and it's sort of like Adam Scott's character is kind of ambiguous. You don't know if he's Jewish or not, but that's kind of a weird element to this family. Like they introduce there. David Koechner is in the movie from, I think he's in The Office, right? He's in a bunch of stuff, but I think he's also.
You probably know him from Anchorman, if nowhere else.
Yeah, and what I learned in the trivia looking at this is they knew they were casting him while they hadn't even casted him, and they had him in the storyboard art. So they really built the movie around his character. And I think that kind of makes sense when you watch the movie and sort of see his family is the trigger for what happens when they get there. They really push that. If the family can be said to be evil at all, I guess it's that.
Yeah, there's some toxic masculinity going on.
Yeah, there's a vague, again, but this was before Trump was elected, but that's kind of what it feels like. This is the racist, awful hillbilly family that shows up to terrorize the more, I guess, urbane sort of liberal family. It is that sort of kind of, it's got a little bit of that Griswold's Christmas Vacation tension built into it. He's the Randy Quaid of this movie.
Yeah.
I thought the casting, it really needed the casting to work, and I thought it did. Overall, it was one of the things that made this movie feel like it did not feel like a low budget horror movie.
No, and part of that to me was the design of the for lack of a better word, the toy creatures.
Yes,
was amazing. I actually have an art book from this that I was given by Simon for Christmas that I really like because it's got a lot of that stuff in there. But the imagination that went into doing this, but not going in an obvious route. They really kind of kept this old school look to like the Jack in the Box and just kind of tweaked it here and there.
Yeah.
And the way they did like the Christmas angel and of course the gingerbread men are hilarious. The design of Krampus himself, they do a really good job of kind of jawsing it by like, you see hoofs and you see him from afar. But you don't really see him till up close. And this is my second time watching this movie, maybe third. I couldn't tell you if that's supposed to really be his face or a mask.
That's what's interesting is like sort of getting at Krampus. And again, that kind of goes to the, who is Krampus? Because I think one of the theories you could have about this is Krampus is Santa. It's like Krampus is, Santa donning the suit to sort of, this is who you get if you don't get Santa. You get the naughty list Santa, which is in line with keeping with the, I guess the original legend of Krampus. Is that was punishment for naughty children.
Yeah. So if you don't know, the original thing was basically like depending. There's different flavors of it, but Santa shows up, or it's a saint. I can't remember whom. Before Christmas, and if you're bad, especially a child, Krampus throws you in his sack, and then he either goes and hits you with a switch. He's just an asshole, or he eats you, depending on which region you're in. And he's just terrible. That's his whole point, is he's just this kind of evil goat man who runs around with kind of a Saint Nick sort of character. And so they have Krampus festivals where, of course, like drunk Europeans like to dress up in these crazy monster costumes and run through the town and scare everybody. And somehow I'd never heard of any of this until I'd say like 2004, something like that was maybe the first time I'd heard of Krampus.
Yeah.
And ever since, it's like, I think it's kind of a cool thing to kind of add into the larger Christmas
legend
Yeah, I wouldn't want to go tell my like nephew who's like 5 about Krampus right now because he'd lose his mind. But certainly as he got older, I like your son's age, I'm going to be sharing Krampus with him at that point.
Oh, he really loves it. This is a great movie for him because, and I would just want to say the flip side of this being PG-13 is that I could show it to him, which I may not have been able to do. I'm not a big fan of showing him R-rated horror movies. He's not seen a ton of horror movies other than Scream. I think he saw Scream. So I was actually happy that I could show this to him. It doesn't get. You're right that it's not quite as convincing as it might have been had they gone to full it levels of terror. Although the Jack in the Box comes close. That's I thought it was an interesting choice having Krampus wear a mask. Like clearly he's not Krampus. Like it's clearly this is somebody playing a part. Mm-hmm. And you don't know who that is, or this is the other theory that I have. It's somebody who's being punished himself and is forced to become this beast. Not unlike a little movie with Tim Allen called The Santa Claus. You may remember when Santa died, Tim Allen's character was forced to become Santa forever. And I always thought that was trippy. Like just in a vacuum.
If you murder Santa,
if you murder, I guess you become Santa forever until you die.
Until you're murdered.
Like you lose. Yeah, exactly. You don't have a life anymore. You're just Santa, and you're just conscripted into being Santa forever. You're immortal, until like somebody kills you. Basically, you fall off a roof and snap your neck. It's not Groundhog Day. I guess you can be killed. I always thought that was an interesting premise. Like it could.
I saw that
could
movie,
be darker.
Maybe in the theater, and it had been a long time. And I caught part of it last year, and that was exactly my thought. Was this movie is dark? Like, this is strange,
right?
And they're playing it up like it's this like fun thing. And I don't know if it's a Disney movie or not, but it came out in that era where like Pretty Woman was originally, I don't know if people know this, but Pretty Woman was originally a gritty drama about a guy who picks up a hooker and like treats her to a weekend. Mm-hmm. And got turned into what you know and love, right? And
Notes from the Studio.
Yeah, it just basically got picked up by Disney Touchstone, and that's what they turned it into. And I kind of wonder now about that about Santa Claus anyway, which is like 4 sequels at this point. But
and my kids love that one too. But there's a dark underbelly to that premise.
Yeah,
I think there is, and that's another thing that I thought of. Again, that sounds like a stretch, but for a movie this referential and sort of like it's the movie that's pulling in from modern and classic Christmas movies, it crossed my mind. Mm-hmm. Like, who is Krampus? Because clearly that's a mask. Mm-hmm. Clearly that's not like So
the elves are also wearing those masks.
Yes, the elves are also they're sort of V is for Vendetta, Guy Fawkes mask. It's kind of inspired elves. Yeah, totally. This movie is weird. It made a lot of interesting design choices, but ultimately, I thought, man, the killer cast and the weirdness of a lot of what's going on really put it over the top for me. Like, this is I can rewatch this, and that's not every sort of horror movie that I can say that about. I really enjoyed it. It had creepy music. I love the callbacks to Up on the Housetop, Reindeer. The down comes good old Santa Claus, and of course they sort of like play that for terror. It's not Santa Claus, it's Krampus, and those hooves are not reindeer hooves, but the cloven hooves of a satanic beast, which is kind of awesome. So we're just watching this again with my kid, and my son watched it with me again. It's we had a good time with it. It's when it could be its own holiday tradition. I enjoyed it.
I can totally see that. All right, I think it's a perfect place to wrap it up. Thank you so much for doing this. This has been a blast. I've really, really enjoyed this.
It's been my pleasure. Merry Christmas, early Christmas.
Yeah, Merry Christmas, everybody. Going to be terrified by a terrible beast man.
Don't try to make Christmas too good, otherwise
Right.
Krampus will come.
Lower your bar. That's the secret
right.
to avoiding eternal damnation.
Lower your bar, and don't let the in-laws come over. Oh man, I guess everybody's going to be having. I told a friend of mine this, that my song idea for socially distant, instead of Blue Christmas, it'll be Zoom Christmas. I'll have a Zoom Christmas without you. Don't let your relatives come over. Have a Zoom Christmas instead.
All right, man.
And maybe Krampus, you can keep him away.
On that note, everyone have a good one.
Thanks.
Show how you feel. If you forget, your fate is sealed. As you grow old, you have been told. Stay warm at heart, keep out the cold. Now that you know, reap what you sow. You have been warned, you have been warned. All your lucky children must prepare for a song you'll find you. This will be a very scary Christmas. If you find you what is this? This will be a very scary Christmas. Quiet, now I think he's here.
That about wraps it up for this edition of The Signal Watch, a production of the League of Melbotus. Thanks for sticking with us. If you enjoyed this podcast, we invite you to drop on by the Signal Watch blog, where you'll find write-ups of a wide variety of movies and more. You can drop comments on this podcast and let us know what you think. We do have a Signal Watch Patreon, and if you're so moved, we'd most certainly appreciate your support. We'll be back soon with more exceedingly high-quality content. So, until next time, God damn it, babies. You've got to be kind.